Before Better Call Saul ever existed, there was Saul Goodman, a corrupt, wisecracking lawyer who had a God-given gift of coming up with the perfect insults at the perfect times. Saul was a hilarious character, but that's also what made it so hard to imagine what a show with him as the protagonist would look like. He was mostly used for comedic relief, a way to lighten up a story that kept getting darker with each season. But then Better Call Saul arrived and introduced us to Jimmy McGill. Jimmy wasn't just a witty sleazeball in a cheap, flamboyant suit. He was a natural charmer, a born salesman, and incredibly resourceful, but he struggled to resist the urge to cut corners and get away with doing the wrong thing. And as the show continued, Jimmy's tragic arc became clear. Until, by the series finale, Saul Gone, Jimmy is well used to repressing his emotions, but from where they lie beneath the surface, they threaten to destroy him. It's why he asks Mike, and then Walter, about what they would do if they had access to a time machine, a motif that will pop up throughout the episode. As Walter correctly points out, this isn't supposed to be a scientific or general history question. What Jimmy is really asking, in a roundabout way because he can't bear to just be honest, is if they can point to the moment they wish they could change the most. At first, Mike says it would be his advice to his son about accepting bribes, which led to his only child being murdered. But then he looks back further in time, to the first time he accepted a bribe. Just like Walter and Jimmy, Mike knows he is drawn to being on the wrong side of the law, and that the only way to keep that part of him dormant will be to go back in time and never give it a chance to thrive in the first place. Walter's answer is typical, about the company he helped found, Grey Matter Technologies, but it's telling that he glances at his watch before answering. The same watch that Jesse gave him, who Walter, at this point in the Breaking Bad timeline, probably thinks is dead, murdered by Jack and his neo-Nazi crew. It's obvious that Walter saw Jesse as his other son, so really, it's just two fathers who wished they could prevent the deaths of their sons. In a way, Walter was lucky. He wanted to die. As he said so long before, all the way back in season 3, he'd lived too long. Unfortunately for Jimmy, he reaches that point when he fully adopts his Saul Goodman persona, but his role as Saul continues for years after this. He's a broken man, but he reaches even lower depths as Gene, where he can't even wear the mask he's been putting on for so long that it replaced his entire personality. So, when he's finally caught and miraculously secures a deal where he only has to serve 7 years in prison, it's unclear if it's Jimmy, Saul, or Gene who's left to accept the punishment. It seems we finally get our answer when he announces he has more information to reveal about Kim Wexler, the love of his life, who he hasn't seen in years, specifically about her involvement in Howard Hamlin's death. Howard's death led to the end of their relationship, where the couple's playful hijinks became truly sadistic and led to an innocent man being murdered. But would Jimmy really be evil enough to incriminate the woman he loved, who could have been his soulmate if he could just go back in time and change his fate? But this isn't Jimmy anymore. This is Gene, a shell of the man he once was, miserable and alone. After all, he considered killing 2 innocent people just in the previous episode. So right up until the trial, his motivations are unclear. As Gene makes his flamboyant entrance to the court, all things are possible by the harmonizing foreplays, adding to the ambiguity. We quickly find our answer. Gene veers off from his previous speech and tells the judge and spectating audience, including Kim, that he was essential to Walter White's drug operation. In just a few sentences, he destroys his plea deal, almost certainly guaranteeing he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Then, he goes a step further, beyond all his criminal enterprises, beyond even Howard Hamlin's death, and blames himself for his role in his brother's suicide. By this point in the series, Chuck is a distant memory, but not to Jimmy. who never properly processed his brother's death because he couldn't begin to forgive himself for contributing to it. What follows after is the moment that Jimmy has probably replayed in his mind hundreds of times as he arrives at Chuck's house with supplies before the events of either series takes place. Even though he kept trying to make sure Jimmy wouldn't be offered a position at his law firm, Chuck tries to have a genuine dialogue with Jimmy about his work as a public defender. He even tells his younger brother that there's no shame in changing paths, just before Jimmy leaves and Chuck grabs a copy of H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. Given the numerous times this book can be seen in Jimmy's possession in Season 6, it's clear that this moment between them has been weighing on his mind for years. Obviously, they served a purpose earlier in the episode, but now is the perfect moment that all of the previous mentions of time travel and the use of that song, All Things Are Possible, are given greater meaning. In the end, Jimmy was able to follow Chuck's advice at a time when it seemed genuinely impossible. When it looked like he had lost all of his humanity, he was able to revert back to his old self, to Jimmy McGill. At first, the episode's title, Saul Gone, seemed like a clever way of hinting at Gene's capture and detainment, just like our protagonist's stage name, Saul Goodman, for It's All Good, Man. Instead, it means exactly what it says, that Saul is no more. It must have been cathartic for Jimmy to be Saul, after he'd spent so many years trying to rein in his most negative traits. But ultimately, although it was a very entertaining character, that doesn't change the fact that it was just a mask. And to truly redeem himself, he would have to find his humanity again. It makes for one of the most painfully and brilliantly bittersweet finales in television history, where, after a downward spiral that went on for years, Jimmy returned. When he could have escaped responsibility for his crimes, served 7 years in prison, and then lived out the rest of his life outside of it, he saw his chance at redemption and seized it. Even if he will likely never experience life as a free man again, Jimmy McGill did the impossible, proving everyone who doubted him, even his own brother, especially his own brother, wrong. He time traveled.
Tie me down, I'd rather be here than lonely. You can lock me up and throw the key away. I'm stuck here now, and these chains aren't so comfy. But with you by my side, the pain will go away.